Welcome to this initial presentation for EAL 302, Literacy Strategies Within Discipline. The first part of this presentation will be common to all of my units from here on in. Thereafter, the second part, which relates to Module 1, will be varied to fit the unit situation. Shorter presentations will precede each module. The reasons for this will become clear in the presentation and as you engage with the unit. This first slide lists the intended learning outcomes for this unit. They are what we and you expect to be able to do at the end of the 13 weeks of the semester. They're important for me as a lecturer because they are where I started this unit build. Before anything, I had to decide the unit objectives. At that time, they were draft and have been modified to the final refined form you see before you. These learning outcomes are where you also should start the unit. I've been concerned in the past that some students go heading into the content or the assessment task without really having a good idea of what they were really doing in the unit. These learning outcomes are in the unit outline, but it can be easy to overlook them as one seeks to find out what one will be doing in the unit. Well, from now on in, expect them to be right up there, up the front, and re-quoted to you on numerous occasions. Because you're education students, it's professionally important that you know the educational logic behind what I'm doing here. The term constructive alignment was developed by John Biggs, a Tasmanian and a UTAS graduate. The concept is not rocket science and thus elegant in its simplicity and application. Biggs argues that for education to work, the intended learning outcomes, assessment, and teaching and learning activities need to be mutually self-supporting, just like a tripod. It's no use assessing something that hasn't been taught or that is outside the scope of the unit. Similarly, introducing topics that have nothing to do with the outcomes or assessment just doesn't make sense. The term used for the latter is curriculum drift. This is where lecturers take the opportunity to inject their favourite topic into units because it's a favourite, they know about it and they want to push their own barrow. This applies not just to university studies. It's like putting short crust pastry assessment task into a lesson series on soups, or retaining wall construction techniques into a unit that is testing concrete slab skills. In a vet context, the weirdness can stick out like a sore thumb. In a uni setting, it's when students ask, why are we listening to this lecture? Or when students put into evaluations that the assessment task had nothing to do with the teaching in the unit. I find the best way to think of constructive alignment is a three-legged stool. If just one leg is weak, one falls over. It simply cannot stand. This rather small and busy screenshot you see before you is of a tool I've developed called UMAP. Essentially, it maps all the key elements of a unit, from intended learning outcomes through assessment tasks, learning activities, professional teaching standards, and Australian Qualifications Framework outcomes. You don't have to be across the detail, although the UMAP may appear in units as standard eventually. However, it should illustrate to you that constructive alignment has actively been applied to the development of this brand new unit, EAL 302. Consequently, all the bits should fit together. In a highly abbreviated format, this slide shows that learning outcomes 1, 2 and 4 are assessed through your literacy philosophy statement, and that the development of that philosophy is fostered by the Module 1 teaching and learning activities. Most specifically, the assessment task demands that you actively and effectively engage with the readings and the discussion boards in the development of the literacy philosophy. The assessment task can't be completed unless I and anyone else can see your engagement with the readings and sharing ideas and questions with your colleagues. If I just assess the philosophy in isolation, it could be whipped up without doing the specified learning, and then thrown in the bin, ticked off. Learning won't have taken place. The current literacy issues won't have been examined, and the capacity to evaluate student needs absent. If the learning task is to matter, and it is that which is at the heart of the unit, not the assessment, then we should see it happening. In this sense, the constructive alignment applies to you as students the same as it applies to me as lecturer and unit designer. The next step after looking at the learning outcomes is to check the assessment. In this case, the Task 1 Plain English file in the Assessments folder. This can be matched up against the outline in your current file for the next 5 weeks. If you can make sense of the assessment task and bring it together with the learning outline, then you're in a position to actually get into the topics in Module 1 and, through active engagement with the discussions, either on the boards or in web rooms, contribute to the achievement of the assessment. But before heading off too quickly, get hold of the rubric, get familiar with it, and keep it by you as you progress through the learning activities and start orienting towards the assessment. The assessment criteria align with the unit intended learning outcomes, whilst the descriptors in the rubric link with the learning activities. As the slide says, know the outcomes, understand and take ownership of the assessment, and engage with the learning activities to construct your learning. What we're aiming for is 2 stools that come out looking essentially the same: your learning and my course design. And hopefully you will be able to see this manifested throughout the unit as we go ahead. I look forward to your feedback in this new way of bringing an understanding of learning and teaching and assessment to you as students.